Western and non-Western music. Again, when we talk about Western culture, Western civilization, we're really talking about the roots that came from Europe. And the European culture is based on three things. One is what the Greeks and the Romans did as far as how to use laws and taxes. And so three things, right? The Greeks and the Romans, the Christianity, better or worse, is part of Europe. And the third is the influence of outsiders, tribal peoples that came into early Europe in the Middle Ages. And their influence, they brought new ideas and creativity and way to manage things as well. So three things: Greeks and Romans, Christianity, and tribal peoples that invaded Rome. And again, early on, when colonization started after 1492, and was the French, the British, and the Spanish. And unfortunately, their colonization of this part of the world ended up in 60 million people dying, whether they intended to happen or not. And when they colonized Africa, which is later, that didn't happen. In Australia, the main attempt to conquer the Aborigines, and there were millions of people that live there as well, that just only few live now. But in Africa, for whatever reason, the colonization didn't result in killing so many people or so many people dying. And so that's why we have perhaps such a diverse cultures that still thrive in Africa. And the natives from this part of the world is not very, hardly any influence at all. So Western and non-Western music. So Western music from the Middle Ages, right, to modern time, composers and performers in Western Europe gradually developed widely accepted standards for tuning, melody, harmony, meter, notation, form, counterpoint, and other basics. That didn't happen in other parts of the world. These rules are a sort of grammar for the language of music, just as the basic rules for putting together sentences and paragraphs help people understand each other. Knowing what to expect from a piece of music helps people understand and like it. Western civilization, we grow up, we learn our parents' language, and we listen to the music they listen to. We listen to music all around us, and this is what our ears become accustomed to, and this is Western music. Music, like language, changes through the centuries. And it's curious that a Bach invention, just an example, a Brahms symphony and a Beatles song are different forms and different genres, and they may sound as if they have nothing in common. Beatles song, Brahms symphony, Bach invention. It's like, wow, there were different styles, but they all use the same musical language and follow basically the same rules. They are examples of Western music and are all more like each other than they are like a Navajo lullaby or a Chinese opera or a West African praise song. Western music versus non-Western music. Wherever Europeans went during the colonial era, they took their music with them. They brought their religion. They insisted, perhaps, that that the natives adopt their religion and their culture. In places like Australia and the Americas, not only do most of the people speak English, European languages, much of their music also sounds Western. What are the rules of European musical language? Western music, like any living language shared by many different communities, has many local dialects. In the United States, how many local dialects we have? And then we talk about music. We have the vernacular music, which is opposed to art music. And as an example, mariachi music, is that Western music or is it non-Western music? Is it so different from the Beatles music or Beethoven? They use trumpets, violins, guitars. These are all European instruments. And I would say that that's a Western music dialect and not an example of non-Western music. It's not from the natives in America, in Mexico. It's something that grew as a result of being colonized. So Western music is generally tonal, based on major minor scales, using an equal temperament tuning based on mathematics. It's an easy to recognize meter, usually 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 or 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 with straightforward rhythms, fairly strict rules on harmony and counterpoint, and not much improvisation in Western art music. You have a lot of improvisation in non-Western music. In the 20th century, art music in particular was very interested in breaking down or even rejecting these rules. They looked a lot to non-Western music to get new ideas, and this had a great influence on Western music. The rules are still widely used, particularly in popular music, the rules of music. They are what makes music, Western music, sound familiar and easy to understand. Non-Western music is any music that grew out of a different culture or music tradition than the European. For someone who grew up listening to Western music, non-Western music will have a recognizably exotic sound. This comes from the use of different tuning systems, different scales, different vocal styles, and performance practices, and different approaches to melody and harmony. Non-Western music is a term used to describe music not from the Western European music tradition, including gamelan orchestra from Indonesia, we can listen to that, or Peking opera from China, etc. There are perhaps hundreds of examples of non-Western music. And in no order, we're going to sample a number of non-Western musics, non-Western music. And let's start with this gamelan orchestra, which they just mentioned, which is from Indonesia, an island, Bali, in Indonesia. Another example of non-Western music, pretty bizarre actually, Tuvan throat singing. It's a type of overtone singing practiced by people in Tuva, Mongolia. And it's one of those curiosities. How do they do this? So where is Tuva? A little tiny country. We have China, Mongolia, and Russia. Tuva is right here. course, we have the Ural Mountains. So there's the European Russia, and then there's the Asia Russia.
Our next guest is a renowned throat singer from the Russian Republic of Tuva. And throat singing is a centuries-old art form in which the singer vocalizes, right, Paul, 2 to 4 notes at a time.
Wow.
Right.
Gotta
The
see
normal singer can how many notes?
One.
One, right.
Yeah.
This man, 2 to 4 notes at a time. This is the CD. It's called Back Tuva Future. From Tuva, please welcome Ondar.
An example of traditional Chinese music. Japanese music performed on a koto. This is a koto. And these bridges are movable. And the player will push down on the string here to change the tension so the pitch is altered. And there are different types of kotos. And so these Asian countries have diverse cultures, just like Africa has diverse cultures. Japan and China have not been friendly for thousands of years. And their language is different and their culture is different. Another example, Tarahumara Indians from Mexico. And there are many different types and tribes that lived in Mexico and what is now the United States and South America. But in the Tarahumara region in Mexico, I had an opportunity and took a train. This train from Chihuahua City to Los Mochis crosses this mountain chain, which is the Rocky Mountains, and is continuing on to South America. And the train is a narrow range railroad, and it was only completed in the early 1960s. And I've heard said that it had more bridges and tunnels per mile than any railroad in the world. Nevertheless, it goes to Copper Canyon, which is a canyon like the Grand Canyon. It's not as wide, but it is actually deeper, and it's not as spectacular, but it's still an amazing geographic feature. And you can take the train all the way to Los Mochis and then back again, or if you want. And we stopped at Copper Canyon and we took the train back. But the Tarahumara Indians were right there at the canyon. And unfortunately, trying to make money now. And as we took the train, you could see for miles that in the countryside, there were rock walls, no mortar, just stacked up very neatly and orderly. I don't know what the purpose was for, but there were plots of land that were divided up, big plots of land by these walls. Interesting to find out why that is. This is an example now of a Northern Plains Indian song from Nebraska in the United States. There were Indians all over the place. I'm actually from Western Pennsylvania, where I grew up, and there are no native Indians there now, but the counties and the rivers are all named after Indians. The school I went to, the high school, was a small school, but in the league that we played sports, the names of the schools were Mohawk, Shenango, Neshannock, Seneca. These are the names of the high schools. There are more as well, but they're all Indian names. another unusual to our Western ears is this music from Bali, Indonesia, called an example of this kecik dance. In the kecik, or monkey dance, as many as 150 village men sitting in concentric circles around a flaming lamp chant and gesticulate. They bow in unison until in trance they appear to have become ecstatically possessed by the spirits of monkeys. An example of non-Western music from Australia, Aborigine, the didgeridoo, which is an instrument. It's just a hollow pipe, and they use circular breathing, where they breathe in their nose and then they puff out their cheeks with air pressure, and then they squeeze their cheeks to have the air still being used but inhaling, so it can go on for a long time. And you say, how can they do this? Because they are actually breathing. It's called circular breathing. We can do that on brass instruments and wind instruments also in the West. I don't know how to do it. Australia, mostly desert population on the east coast and on the northwest coast.
That was a little something on the ditch. Hope you like it. We got in that language we got there's many different names, but the two most common names in Australia is Yiraki.
An example of African women yodelers, non-Western music. Incidentally, Africa, of course, was also colonized. Look at this: Belgian, British, French, German, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish. But they didn't have as much an influence on the natives because the natives didn't die as many. Of course, they abducted people, and this is where the slave trade came from. What a sad part of humanity that Western civilization did this. But here we are. Islamic chant. It's one of those things that's frozen in time. It hasn't advanced since the time of the Romans or before. This map shows the extent of an Arabic empire through 750. Muhammad was only born shortly before that. And it's important to note that they occupied Spain for 500 years, the Arabs, over 500 years. And here we have Turkey, and this is in the map from 750, but the expansion of the Arabic territory continued. Here's the Bosphorus Strait, and was Constantinople now Istanbul. This was all part of the Roman Empire. And the Arabs were all the way up close to Vienna, and for many years attempting to conquer Europe. And this, they were defeated by an army that was led by a Polish general. But nevertheless, this part of Europe and this part of the Europe is distinctively different music culture as a result of the influence of the Arabs.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah.
Bulgarian women singers from Bulgaria. Where's Bulgaria? Right here. Again, in the other map we looked, and the Arabs in 750 were over here, but later, right, like I said, all the way up to Vienna. So this part of Europe has a distinct culture compared to British culture or the culture of the Nordic countries. dance, rhythm, song from Andalusia, Spain. This is the primary area that now exhibits this flamenco style. And Spain was not a united country until third. Isabella and somebody else. Anyway, they joined forces to make the country of Spain. But so there was just small local groups that were fighting the Arabs over 500 years. And finally, in 1492, actually, is when they reclaimed all of the territory from the Arabs.
Tú eres una cigüeña, hay que rozar la tierra. Ay, ay, yo soy, hay un pájaro negro caído y en ella ¿por qué me escupa en la cara? ¿Por qué me escupa en la cara? Que mate...
That's the end of a few examples of non-Western music and comparing it to Western music.